Hi, I'm horny for gelflings, Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be looking at not just two women from a film, but the entire toy line that was not made with said film, which is a bit of a running theme in this series. So, with all that said, let's just get right into the Dark Crystals, Aughra and Kira. The setup for the Dark Crystal is essentially that 1,000 years ago, a very powerful crystal, the Dark Crystal, per the title, cracked. And from that crack, two races appeared. The sort of more hungry for money, selfish Skeksis, and the more, peaceful mystics. Um, Essentially, for 1,000 years, the Skeksis truly ruled the world of Thra until, a young, scrappy young gelfling who I'm horny for was sent on a quest to sort of reconstruct the crystal, and I won't give any spoilers, but lots of horny and scary puppets abound. The movie was released in 1982 by Universal Pictures and was very much heralded as sort of the first movie to not feature human actors, rather completely done with puppets and animatronics by Jim Henson Company, who had were also kind of hungry for more legitimacy themselves. It seems they certainly got success with Muppets, Sesame Street, whatnot, but this was really a real left turn with a much more like kind of dark fantasy kind of vibe for it. Because of that, some parents were still skittish back then, even back in the 80s, kids, but they were a little more concerned about it. That said, the movie, it did okay. It wasn't a gangbuster success, but it was not a flop either. It sort of made a profit in the end, but nevertheless was not a soaring success that maybe they had hoped for. Of the two characters in question today would be Kira and Aughra. We'll start with Kira. She was, like Jen, our main hero, a gelfling, and she joined his quest fairly early in the movie. There's not a lot to say about her. I mean, they really kind of try to apply that like motherly maternal trope onto her by giving her a little sort of like dog-like puppet named Fizzbig. Likewise, she at least had a kind of cool power per se, where she had wings as opposed to Jen. Very much a girlfriend character, but very much, very intrinsic to the plot. Very much, not to spoil things, but spent some time in a refrigerator. The other character would be Aughra, who is just, just a drag queen's dream. She was keeper of the secrets, an astronomer, very much a pit stop along the way of their quest to reassemble the Dark Crystal, a very important step in the reassembly process, let's say, but very much, very much in that sort of Ursula kind of vein of characters, just big, busty, just a lot of a lot, just a lot of a lot. I mean, really, I would say one of the fan favorite characters of the whole movie. Despite this being 1982 and very early in the 80s, before that kind of movie to toy line kind of formula pipeline was really established, it still did follow Star Wars' cues, and they did want a toy line made of the movie. In this case, Hasbro was tapped to do it, and while they did, they sculpted it up, they prototyped them, they photographed them for catalogs for Toy Fair, they had vehicles, the giant still do, they had the bug creatures. I mean, they had a healthy little, package presented for distributors for Toy Fair, but no one's really sure. I can't say definitively why Hasbro didn't make these. There's a lot of speculation. I think the probably most common and probably most true is that the actual toy company, like the Kmart's and the all the toy stores just weren't interested in it, and that's possibly because of parents' concerns, because of the darker subject matter, because of it's not so much that they saw the movie, but they saw that this was sort of a dark philosophical movie. Perhaps not realizing that this was going to be a recurring theme throughout the 80s, where we would get your Gremlins and your all these like dark movies that were for kids apparently. R.I.P. Artax. But nevertheless, everybody passed on it, so we wouldn't really even kind of know about this until years later. As Generation X and sort of older millennials got older, however, they did sort of do a little reevaluation of the movie, and like a lot of the other sort of dark fantasy movies aimed at kids at the time, it was given a second look. So I feel like the smaller toy companies did eventually take notice of this and start producing toys based off of the movie. So the first real true example of, kind of playable action figures, as it were, would come from Sideshow Collectibles, who in 2001 did two very highly detailed figures of Jen and Kira that I have feelings on. The next batch, the next real spiritual successor to the original line, would come in 2016 when Funko, as part of their reaction line before Super 7 kind of took the name, recreated essentially what was promised in that Toy Fair magazine. They made the entire line more or less of what was, shown in the catalog. So we did finally get Aughra. We did finally get a little 5 POA Kenner-esque sort of Kira figure. We got all the major players. So these are one of my favorite kind of, final verdicts where we get pretty much precisely what we wanted back in the day. And this is sort of like a win for all, fans of vintage toys and the Dark Crystal. I will, of course, mention that there was sort of another kind of spiritual successor to the Dark Crystal with a 2019 Netflix series called Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. It's pretty good. It definitely picks up, pieces from the original, and we do get to see Aughra again, so big fan of that. There was, again, a sort of, reaction-ish toy line based off of that, but yeah, I feel like the toy line plus the Netflix series, didn't exactly, light anybody on fire, but certainly, fans of the Dark Crystal definitely tuned in and definitely enjoyed it. And that'll about do it for Kira, Aughra, and pretty much everyone else from the Dark Crystal. Again, it's one of my favorite kind of examples of, we did get eventually precisely what we wanted, precisely, the toy line that was promised to us. And I love, being able to slot those figures into your vintage collection, sort of, despite being new figs, kind of where they belong on your vintage 80s shelf. So, and also, I mean, I love the Dark Crystal. I loved it back then. I love the sort of, kind of dark, macabre, philosophical kind of edge to it. And again, the characters, I don't know why. I don't know why I feel the way I do about those sexy, sexy little puppets, but here we are. So I thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all those YouTubey things. And I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.